Call on Government Order of the Day number 5.
Ngāti Pūkenga Claims Settlement Bill, first reading.
Mr Speaker.
The Honourable Christopher Finlayson.
Mr Speaker, I move that the Ngāti Pūkenga Claims Settlement Bill be now read a first time, and I nominate the Māori Affairs Committee to consider the bill. And I'm sure they'll do a very good job, although very soon I think they'll have about 7 or 8 bills before the committee, so there'll be no time to waste. I expect them to get on with it, and knowing the calibre of the people on that committee, which includes you, Mr Speaker, I'm sure that will happen. I'm so very pleased to speak in support of this bill, which, like the other Tauranga bills, has been many years in the making. It's almost 3 years to the day since the deed was signed, and despite the time that's been taken, I never had any doubt at all that we would get to this stage. It has been worth the wait. Mr Speaker, on 4 December 2009, the Crown confirmed the mandate of the iwi to negotiate a settlement of all historical treaty claims of Ngāti Pūkenga. On 25 January 2010, Ngāti Pūkenga and the Crown signed terms of negotiation, which set out the scope, the objectives and the general procedures for negotiations. On 31 July 2012, Ngāti Pūkenga and the Crown signed a statement of position and intent as a basis for the final deed of settlement, and on 23 November 2012 the deed was initialled, and then on a beautiful day, 7 April 2013, the deed was signed. The bill is going to give legislative effect to the final agreements on the redress as set out in the deed. As with all these settlement bills, it's very important to place in the permanent record of the House the history of why we're here, because these historical claims relate to the Crown-initiated military conflict in Tauranga in 1864, actions which were in breach of the treaty and its principles. Despite assuring Ngāti Pūkenga it would scrupulously respect their interests, the Crown extinguished all of the Ngāti Pūkenga customary interests in Tauranga land by confiscating a very large part of the district. Ngāti Pūkenga became dependent on lands gifted to them by other iwi, but the Crown failed to protect Ngāti Pūkenga tribal interests in these lands from the impact of the individualisation of Māori land tenure, which the Crown imposed in the 19th century. Mr Speaker, the financial and commercial redress provided to Ngāti Pūkenga seeks to recognise the losses suffered by them. They are going to receive $7 million plus interest, as well as commercial redress properties and rights of first refusal in relation to RFR land. Cultural redress provided to Ngāti Pūkenga includes the vesting of cultural redress properties, protocols and statutory acknowledgements, and the vesting of minerals in vested land. Mr Speaker, I too join with my friend and colleague Mr Bridges in his, as he said, a crusade, perhaps politically incorrect term, but in his desire to see a museum in Tauranga. It's something I was very interested in achieving when I was the Minister for Arts and Culture, and a great city like Tauranga with such a special history in terms of Māori culture needs to have a museum. The other day, the Telegraph in London said that we're, no surprises to any of us, but said that we're the best country on earth. And one of the 26 reasons they gave for that self-evident proposition was the unique and very strong Māori culture. And it's so important that we recognise around the country in various regional museums that unique culture, and so too in the Tauranga district. So I hope that Mr Bridges and his parliamentary colleague and our mutual friend Mr Muller will be able to persuade the Minister for Culture and Heritage that that regional museums fund could be used to very good purpose. Mr. Speaker, Ngāti Pūkenga were renowned as warriors and priests. Due to these skills and the ability to move at short notice, they were called on to assist tribal groups with their disputes and were rewarded with gifts of land. There are so many who have worked tirelessly on these claims and more widely for the iwi of Ngāti Pūkenga, but I particularly want to mention the late Wirimu Ohaya, who displayed the qualities of a warrior and a priest. Bill was a leader in the farming, forestry and kiwi fruit industries of Tauranga Moana and a Maori leader on the national stage. He worked very hard to bring together the different kāinga of Ngāti Pūkenga. As I said, the Crown let them down in the 19th century. As a consequence of that, they were dispersed to various parts of the North Island, Manaia in Coromandel, Pakikaikutu in Whangarei, Makatu, as well as Tauranga. And it's therefore not surprising that each kāinga operated autonomously and independently of one another. Bill's vision, however, was that they would work together, and that came to realisation through the negotiations process. And now, once the bill is passed, we move to the post-settlement environment. Ngāti Pūkenga priestly skills continue to this day, with their relationship building leading them to becoming part of two collectives, the Tauranga Moana iwi and the Hauraki collectives. They've also built an enduring and warm relationship with the Crown through their interactions with officials, and in particular my Chief Crown Negotiator, Dame Patsy Reddy, who once again I want to acknowledge for all her work. I also want to thank my ministerial colleagues and various agencies for their extensive input into making this settlement possible. So now, as I say, the bill, once passed, moves to the Select Committee, and I very much look forward to the Ngaitarangi legislation coming in shortly thereafter, and I'm sure the Māori Affairs Select Committee is going to deal with this legislation expeditiously so it can come back to the House and hopefully be enacted before the end of the year. Mr. Speaker, I think the bill needs to go without delay to the committee, and thus I commend the bill to the House.
Members, the question is that the motion be agreed to.
Mr. Speaker.
I call